And that was in early 2016. I sold my first jump rope to a stranger in June 2016. On Halloween 2019, I sold the business, and at that point, we were generating $6 million in annual sales. So I never really had time to stop and think about it, really, until we got very close to the end when I was thinking about selling it, and I came to realize just how much the business could be worth. And I remember sitting down with my wife and saying, we're talking about several $1 million here.
Cool. Ben, welcome back. It's good to see you. I'm not going to kick it off with a big fancy intro from me. I'll let you do the talking. Do you want to give us a brief intro into who you are and a little bit about your super interesting backstory?
Well, thank you. It's good to be back, mate. I'll try and keep it super interesting then. No pressure. My name's Ben Leonard. I sold the first e-commerce business to one of the new breed of aggregators in 2019 out of Europe, the first European brand to be sold to an aggregator out of Europe in 2019. That was a sports brand, a fitness brand called Beast Gear. And I started that brand in 2016, kind of accidentally. I was working as a marine ecologist here in the northeast of Scotland in the oil industry. So I used to go off to ships and oil rigs and that type of thing and tell the oil guys they couldn't throw chemicals in the sea, and they loved me for that. I quite liked my job. But I was still aware that I was a small cog in a huge machine. And then something happened. A lot of entrepreneurial stories have something like this. I got quite sick with a heart problem, and I couldn't work. I couldn't do any of my fitness hobbies. So my physical health was bad, but that made my mental health decline. I was not in a good spot. And I started a fitness brand as a hobby. And I'd actually had the idea 4 years previously, after training at CrossFit in 2012. And I did nothing about it because we grow up in this society where we believe entrepreneurs are other people, that you have to have a business degree, or you have to inherit a ton of money, or you have to invent something completely brand new. That's what we all traditionally grow up thinking, right? We think you're supposed to go to school, university, get a job.
I remember I remember when I first stumbled across Alibaba. This was probably 5 years ago. I literally remember thinking, that's for other people.
Yeah.
Buying stuff in bulk, that's for other people. People like me don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a mindset block. And I had this idea to start a fitness brand in 2012 and did nothing. And it wasn't until I got really sick in 2016, I needed something to do just to distract me. I thought, well, I wasn't very happy with the skipping rope. I was using the jump rope, if you're in the US, that I was using at my training. So I'll try and make a better one, and I'll show it to some of the local gym owners. And if they like it, maybe they'd stock some for their users. And I thought, well, and if that goes well, maybe I could expand and stock in quite a few gyms. And as I was developing this skipping rope, I realized that was not such a good idea. I could sell on the internet to strangers. And I discovered a platform called Shopify that let idiots like me build e-commerce websites. And then I found out there was this amazing thing called Amazon FBA. Because I was one of those people that thought that when you buy something on Amazon, you're buying it from Jeff.
From Jeff, yeah.
And, Jeff's personally picking and packing your stuff. And that was in early 2016. I sold my first jump rope to a stranger in June 2016. On Halloween 2019, I sold the business, and at that point, we were generating $6 million in annual sales. We were selling in the UK, Europe, a little bit in Australia, and a little bit in the Middle East. And that was kind of, I guess that's chapter one of the story, right? And then I sold, and I moved on to some new things. I guess we could dig into that.
Well, let's briefly talk. I mean, there's two short points that I just want to touch on, and then we can move into the other stuff. The first one is, how did it feel to go from doing something, you couldn't really pick something further away from being an e-commerce entrepreneur, into having a business doing $6 million a year in a relatively short space of time? Like, how did that feel at that point?
I often think that I didn't really stop to think about how it felt, because it was going so fast. It was like, I actually thought, I was asked this yesterday in a different interview, and I kind of came up with this analogy, and it's okay, so I'll use it again. It was kind of like going whitewater rafting and losing your paddle, and you're having a great time. It's kind of fun, but you're just being dragged along, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, that's how fast it was, right? I had no choice but to just go with it and learn. It wasn't a case of, sometimes we have the luxury to learn about things that we're not going to need to know for a little while. And I try to encourage clients, consulting clients and stuff, not to do that and just focus on what you need to do now. I call that just-in-time learning. It's not my phrase, it's just one that I like. I had no choice but to do just-in-time learning. I just had to like figure it out. And the growth was so fast. So at times it felt surreal, but because I never pulled a lot of money out of the business. It all went back in, and when the business was finally in a position to pay me, even then I didn't really pay myself as such. I was really just paying back director's loans that the business kind of owed me. So I never really had time to stop and think about it, really, until we got very close to the end when I was thinking about selling it, and I came to realize just how much the business could be worth. And I remember sitting down with my wife and saying, we're talking about several $1 million here, or pounds, and it kind of being like, holy cow.
Shit.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? Were you actively looking to sell, or did they come to you?
I was looking to sell. What had happened was I made the decision in early 2019. I was actually at a trade show in Germany with a friend of mine, and we were just discussing the percentage of sales that were coming through Amazon on the business, which was like 98%. We were discussing the amount of risk tied up in that, but also the transition I was at in my life. Wanted to move house, baby on the way, ambitions to try different things. The business was really at a crossroad. It was absolutely bananas, and the team was me and 3 freelancers. And I kind of had a choice to hire more people, whether that was local or overseas, and get into more markets, or think about selling. Because I'd begun to hear whispers that selling an e-commerce business was now like an actual thing, Previously, if you wanted to sell an e-commerce business, you weren't going to get very much for it, because people kind of considered that it wasn't a real big boy grown-up business, because it didn't have, walls and a roof and a door.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who'd sold 2 businesses with a popular listing website. And I spoke with him and got a few other opinions, and the opinion of my accountant, who so happens is now my co-founder in the brokerage business we own. And I decided to explore what I could find. So yeah, I was looking to sell. I wasn't desperate to sell, but I was looking to see if I could attract a good offer.
And when that check cleared and the cash hit the bank account, how did that feel?
Yeah, it was surreal. Because, I grew up comfortably, middle class family, I guess. My parents both came from working class backgrounds, but, they sort of became middle class thanks to, the hard work that they put in and the oil and gas industry where we live, frankly. And, so I'd never struggled for money, but also I'd never, a lot of people where I lived would end up in very high paying engineering positions, whereas I was an ecologist. So I'd always kind of come to terms with the fact that I would never make that much money until I discovered that I was good at e-commerce. And I discovered that I actually had entrepreneurial genes that had skipped a generation. My grandparents were entrepreneurs. And so when the money hit my bank account, it was so weird, because I'd got used to making a lot of money for the business and seeing bonkers sales numbers for the business, and the business bank account growing and growing, and placing stupidly large purchase orders for products. But then when that money landed in my personal bank account, which I'd had for years, I was speechless. I took a screenshot, which I've probably still got saved somewhere, don't know where. But we didn't do anything wild to celebrate. We went to some cheap burger joint the next day and just ate burgers and went for a walk and talked about the future.
So, I mean, because the way that I describe it when you're doing e-commerce now is it becomes like a game. It's just numbers on a screen.
Yes, that's exactly.
It's like you say, you're ordering these POs, and they're 6-figure POs, whatever, and it doesn't feel like money. Yeah.
Which is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because it allows us to get comfortable with these large sums of money, but it's a curse because it feels so gamified. It feels separate from real life. Real life is cooking in your kitchen and walking down the street, and then you come to your computer or you come to your phone and you escape into this other dimension of your e-commerce business. And because it doesn't feel real in that way, that's how you make mistakes, because you don't take it seriously enough. And that's how people fall into the trap of treating it like a side hustle or just trying to sell a mishmash of random stuff, rather than treating it with respect and building a real brand that people love and care about.
And so we said that we talk about some of the things that you think contributed towards your success.
Yeah.
What you just mentioned there, would that be kind of one of them, do you think?
pivotal one. Because you got to remember, I didn't get into it to sell stuff online. I didn't get into it because I heard that there was this opportunity with Shopify or dropshipping or Amazon FBA. I'd had an idea to build a fitness brand, and then I had an idea to sell products to guys who own gyms. And then I was like, oh, I could sell these on the internet. So it was always brand first for me. And I was fortunate, I guess, that so many of my competitors were either not really building a brand, or were doing a really poor job of it, or they really were a brand. They were a legit bona fide brand, but they sucked at Amazon. You know, this was 2016, 2017. You had lots of fitness brands who were reasonably well known off of Amazon on their own website, for instance, but they were doing a poor job of Amazon, and it was so easy to beat them. So the fact that I made sure that my business looked and felt and behaved like a real consumer packaged goods brand, and we built relationships with our customers outside of Amazon, whether that was through our email marketing, through chatbots, through social media, we gave them an experience that made them know, like, and trust us and come back to us, which meant that, you know, let's say they may well have just been searching for a jump rope when they bought my first jump rope. But later when they had another problem that needed to be solved. They needed lifting straps. Well, I really liked the experience I got from those Beast Gear guys, so I'll search for lifting straps and buy their lifting straps. And then, oh, I need some wrist straps. And suddenly they've got 3 of your products, and now they're a fan. And now they're going to actually follow you on social and subscribe to your emails and wait for your next product to come out with anticipation. And maybe they need a weightlifting belt, and yours is not in stock. But actually, because they now love your brand, they're going to wait for it to come into stock.
And that's power, isn't it?
That is power, and that's how we won. And that's how we beat, you know, you would search for weightlifting knee sleeves. And extremely popular knee sleeves brands, which had existed for years and years and years, would be ranked below us on Amazon. And that was powerful. And that's how we won. And that was the key thing behind the growth.
Because I still remember I bought a gum shield.
Oh yeah.
When I first got into doing a little bit of boxing, and I bought a Beast Gear gum shield, and I think a lot of people don't really realize how important the name of a brand is.
Oh yeah.
Because it's the core of everything, and even when you say it now, Beast Gear.
Yeah.
It makes you feel something, right?
Yeah. There's 2 things that just popped into my head because you told me about the gum shield there, or mouth guard for our American friends. So the first one is this. Yeah, you mentioned the name there. The funny thing that I tried to do with that was, again, and this was something that I think contributed to the success of the brand, was fitness is one of those industries that I think was begging to be disrupted. It's about who's the biggest, the strongest, the muscliest, or the thinnest, the fastest, whatever. I am an averagely fit guy with asthma, but I made myself the face of the brand. Now, the new owners have kind of moved away from this, unfortunately, but you can use the Wayback Time Machine if you want to look up the old material. But I was front and center of the brand in our videos, on our website, all of our email marketing, all of our social, and it resonated with people because, let's be honest, my customers weren't Floyd Mayweather. My customers were normal people. And I was basically saying, look, you might well be a heavyweight champion of the world, or whatever. Mayweather's not a heavyweight, doesn't matter. Or you might be Joe Bloggs, who's really overweight and trying to run your first 5K. Whoever you are, so long as you set some goals, you're a beast and you're welcome. And that really worked, right? So I'd encourage people to do that. You can make yourself the face of the brand, so long as the brand isn't all about you. If the brand is completely all about you, that makes it difficult to sell. But the next thing that came to my head there, when you mentioned the gum shield, was this funny story, which I go into more in the book. But people can check this out. This is one of the times I knew that we were onto something good. I received a message from somebody with a photograph of a famous MMA fighter called Michael Venom Page. And they'd taken a photograph of their TV screen and sent it to me. It was him grinning at the camera like this with my gum shield in.
Oh, that's amazing.
He was not a paid athlete by us. He just bought our product. And if people go now and search like Michael Page Bellator, you'll find the video. The fantastic thing is him showing his, grinning like that and showing the gum shield to camera. The less fantastic thing is like 15 minutes later when he gets knocked out, but never mind. Right? We can pretend he won. that was, that there were other moments like Joe Hart, the England goalkeeper, Virgil van Dijk using the stuff, a few others. I mean, I sponsored plenty of athletes, but those guys are super famous. Them using my products on their own back, me not asking them to. That's kind of when I knew that we were onto a good thing.
And because I don't know what it is about certain brands, but I think it's a very powerful thing when, especially on a marketplace like Amazon, you make people feel something. And I still remember when I bought that gum shield, just looking at the brand, the way, the name of it, the way that it looked, the photography, you got a feeling. It didn't just feel like some cheap crap that you were buying. And I think it's difficult to do. Is that something that did you study a load of marketing books and come up with that, or did that just come from within?
It kind of came naturally, everybody is a fan of some brand, right? It could be to do with your hobby or your day job or even the food products in your cupboard. And I just kind of thought, well, if I'm building a brand, I need to make sure it looks and feels and behaves like other brands do. How do they make me feel, and what do they do to make me feel that way? Well, they give me an experience, first based on a quality product, so I enjoy the experience with the product. So lesson number one is only sell quality products. But then on the back end, how do they treat me? Whether that's customer service or whether that's additional value in helpful, compelling, engaging, useful, free content that makes me improve my life and know, like, and trust them as an authority. And so I just tried to do that with content on our blog, YouTube, socials, contacting influencers, developing products with athletes to make sure that they were high quality, only selling great quality products, all that stuff. And you hit the nail on the head there when, it's about how you feel. There's a lot of definitions for what a brand is, and many of them are good. My favorite is that a brand is a group of products that solves problems for a particular group of people. And branding is how you make them feel. And marketing is how you tell them about it. And I think the reason that matters is a lot of people have a great brand, like they've developed good quality products, and on paper they've got great branding. Like, in theory, people should feel really good about your brand based on the quality products and the content and all the assets around your brand that you're developing. But they fall down on their marketing and they're not telling people about it. And it's kind of like this: if a tree falls over in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. If you have a fantastic brand but you don't market it effectively, it doesn't make a dent. It might as well not exist. And that's where people are falling down, I think. That's where a lot of people are like, but I've done everything right. I followed all the advice I found on YouTube and I developed this product and yada yada yada. Yeah, but the world doesn't know about it properly because you're not understanding who your audience is and where they want to be marketed and how they want to be marketed to.
Very, very true. And I think it's becoming more and more important now on modern day Amazon, right? Even more important than it was when you first got into the game.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was one of the. This is good. I don't want this to sound arrogant, but it's just, well, it's true. I was one of the first people to really start doing external traffic, and I didn't even realize it at first. I was just like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I need to create content and tell people to buy my products, and I would send people to both my website and Amazon, and I didn't really care where they bought from me as long as they bought from me. And now, that back then that was sort of an optional bonus that was going to take you the extra mile, and it did. Now that's not optional. Like, you've got to do it, and so now you've got to find ways to do it that other people aren't doing it, and get really clever. And that might be, allocating a budget to spending significant money on affiliate deals with blogs, for instance. Whereas previously you could probably just bash out a bunch of your own blogs and maybe swap some backlinks with some other people. Now you really got to take this stuff very seriously and actually account for it in your planning in terms of your numbers.
Yeah. So speaking of now and modern day Amazon, all that type of stuff, what are you doing now then? Since you had the exit, you've had the success. You just enjoying it and just put your feet up, or what's happening now?
That would be boring, and I do sometimes bite off more than I can chew. But hey ho, those are lessons you learn, right? So, for about 5 nanoseconds, I flirted with the idea of going back to a job, And
Really?
oh yeah, but very briefly, right? Because I was just kind of like, well, what am I going to do? But I knew that I was an entrepreneur, right? And I couldn't not be. And I had unfinished business. And I knew I wanted to solve problems. So the first problem that I knew I had to solve was the one that I experienced with the broker that sold my business. Or very nearly didn't sell my business. So the organization that I worked with made a catalog of errors. The final one was almost catastrophic, but we caught it, and my accountant Alison saved the day. It would have cost us around $500,000. And so the obvious thing for us to do was to create a better experience for buyer and seller. And so we formed ecom brokers. So that was the first thing that we set up after I sold was ecombrokers.co.uk, help e-commerce business owners plan and execute their exits. But I knew that I had unfinished business in building brands. And I wanted to keep building brands because that way I can relate to people that I work with, whether that's I do some consulting or whether that's with people whose business exits we're planning. And a funny thing happened. Shortly before I sold Beast Gear, maybe 6 months before I sold Beast Gear, somebody added me on Facebook and started messaging me. And it turned out this was a competitor of mine who basically was like, look, I can see the numbers you're doing. I've helium 10'd you. And also, I'd had some press by this point. He was like, how on earth are you doing this? And I was polite, but I didn't really say much. It turned out this guy lived 20 minutes from me, which was funny, because most of my competitors were on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And I didn't really say much, and then I sold the business, and he got back in touch and paid me for some consulting. And we did quite a few consulting sessions, and became friends, and we decided to go into business together. So this is my buddy Sean, who he runs the day-to-day of this sports brand that we've set up, and I mentor him. And so one of the brands I own is in the sports space. I will be going very public about that brand. The reason I'm not quite yet is because it's still quite new, and therefore it's vulnerable to attacks from people who may decide they don't like me or whatever. So absolutely that brand is going to be going public. We just need to let it sort of mature a bit more so that it's large enough that it can handle those attacks. But it exists, and I'm very proud of it, and I will be speaking publicly on podcasts, on stage, etc. about it in the not too distant future.
Sorry, Ben. Just to interrupt. This is a topic that comes up quite a lot, especially for us as gurus. When I say us, I mean myself and Tom. Is we quite often get asked, what's our brand and why are we not public with the brand? And we've thought about it a lot. We've thought about just being completely open, and we've tried to weigh up the pros versus the cons. And the pros are that I think it's very interesting for people to see, behind the scenes of what you're actually working on when you're claiming to be an Amazon expert. And it's good, to actually say, well, this is you can't accuse us as being false or fake when you can see the brand. But the cons are, we feel like we don't have that moat within the market yet where we would want, 20,000 plus people that include people that have got money to invest, people that could, I don't want to say they could just copy our brand overnight, but we don't feel like we have the big enough moat. And what are your kind of thoughts on that in general, on people being public or?
So I think being public is a great thing. And I do believe that is the strategy to go down long term. But you can't always be public yet. Take, for example, Simple Modern, owned by Mike Beckham. He's very public about it. But we're not, with these brands, your brand and my brand, my new brand, those brands aren't in that position yet. So while I believe in building in public, it's actually, if there were fewer dicks in the world, we could be public about it now, but there aren't. So we can't, frankly, if we're going to be honest about it. But I do believe in building in public, and I think it does two things. One, it gives credibility, and two, is it indirectly calls out the fakers, who either don't have brands or are far less successful than they claim to be. But for anyone watching or listening, I know Tom and Alex's brand, and they're crushing it, so... There you
I
go.
mean, it's obviously been a super important part of our personal brand, if you will, to be transparent. And like I said, we have debated on whether or not. And we've always come to the conclusion that it's not worth it yet. But I think probably in the next 12 months, we will probably feel like we're at that point where we would like to share it, because I think it makes for very interesting content for people to learn from, and it's easier to teach and to educate and give your experience when it's not just, you know, this mysterious black box that nobody knows.
And I will be doing the same with this brand and others. And so, you know, there's another brand that's in development, which I've been developing for a couple of years now in the parent and baby space. And the first product has taken a long time to develop because it's a highly technical product that requires a lot of specific design, which you cannot get wrong for safety reasons, frankly. But I have traveled to the other side of the world to meet the factory, and we are going through meticulous processes to get it right. And the difference with this brand is that as soon as it launches, I will be public about it. And the reason for that is that this is a different kettle of fish. The other one is a purely e-commerce, primarily Amazon play. This is going to be retail. We're running a Kickstarter. With a Kickstarter, like, you're being very public by default. We're going to be going for retail. And I really want to tell the story about how we developed that brand, because I think the story of the product development is interesting, and I think it's quite juxtaposed to what a lot of people do in e-commerce, which is just kind of take something off the shelf and sell it. You know, this is a in-depth product development, not in China, and I'm very excited to share that with the world and kind of almost use it as like a case study.
So you're cool with saying where you've been for this product development, right? Like you're
we're developing that in Vietnam. I can absolutely talk about that.
Yeah. So how was that experience being China versus Vietnam?
Yeah, very interesting. So with Beast Gear, we manufactured a lot of our stuff in China, not all of it. Some was in the Middle East. With this brand, the new baby and parent brand, we're 100% manufacturing in Vietnam. It's been a really good experience so far. Vietnam is clearly a lot smaller than China, so its capacity for manufacturing is clearly less. However, they are extremely keen to do business with the West. They are very much enablers, and they make things happen. What's quite attractive about it is the contracts written in English are entirely enforceable there. It's a lot easier to do business there. There's quite a lot of incentives that the government has set up for both buyers and factories to actually make deals happen. The infrastructure is improving all the time. Quite a few factories in Vietnam are Chinese owned. It's worth pointing out. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Many are Korean owned as well. We don't have the same human rights concerns that we have in China. You know, frankly, I'm not happy about what's going on in the west of China with the Uyghur people. It's disgusting, actually. Now, I don't blame Chinese civilians. I don't blame, Chinese factories for that. But it's just good to be able to manufacture somewhere where you're not concerned about that. China's probably going to invade Taiwan, and when it does, I'd rather not be manufacturing there. All that said, I have no problem with China. Like, I've been to China. I like China. I like Chinese people. I might manufacture in China again. But I've always been kind of a fan of zigging where everyone else zags, and not having all your eggs in one basket. And for that reason, I'm quite comfortable and happy that it's turned out that the best people for us to manufacture this product happen to be Vietnam. And having now been to Vietnam, I'm a big fan of manufacturing there.
Has there been any differences in terms of parts of the process or payment terms or like culturally, or how does that look?
There's some similarities with culture. One of the big things about Chinese people is the whole idea of not losing face. That's an important thing. That's also quite important in Vietnam. But also many of in many of these cultures, for instance, actually most of the people that I have dealt with in Vietnam are actually Korean. But it's a similar thing. They also are not keen on losing face. But the attitude that I've experienced there has been very much one of mutual partnership and wanting to grow together, with a path to great payment terms as things ramp up, but recognizing their needs to as you begin. They're under pressure too. They're trying to grow too. We're working with a relatively new factory, very experienced guy who set up on his own after being somewhere else, and they're keen to do business with startups, which is one thing that really worked well for us. It's getting busier in Vietnam though. A lot of large manufacturers are moving out of China and into Vietnam. But a lot of smart Chinese factories are putting factories in Vietnam. Like, they're actually Chinese-owned factories coming to Vietnam because they know that people are cottoning on to the fact that they might not be in China.
Interesting. And so you've developed this particular product from scratch. Yes. We've experienced ourselves in the past 12 months the ups and downs with developing products from scratch. Have you got any insights into that process?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is something I say quite a lot, which is cheap is expensive and expensive is cheap. Which, in other words, means if you try and do something on the cheap, it's going to turn out very expensive. It might not even turn out at all. And if you spend the money first time to get it right, it's going to be a lot cheaper and more satisfying in the long run. So, to design this product, I've spent in the region of £70,000, which is probably $100,000 in dollars. And we're not done yet. And we sought out a top designer in a related industry to ours who could apply expertise from one industry to our industry. That was the first thing, finding the top design talent. He's based in the UK. It doesn't matter where he was, but the fact that he's been in the UK has actually been quite useful because I frequently had to send him prototypes to then get his feedback to then tweak his designs. So it's working with great designers and factories who are patient to go through a prototyping process with you. We're on prototype number 5 and we're not quite done yet. So there's that. If you can afford to, go out there and meet them and work on prototypes with them. And many times people won't meet their suppliers, their manufacturers, until there are several orders in, or tens or dozens of orders in. But with this factory, I've gone out to meet them before we've even placed an order. And that was phenomenal. Like, the goodwill that has generated, I think is really important. And really showed that we were taking this thing seriously. The other thing about developing products from scratch is to be very careful on intellectual property. You want to make sure that you're not infringing on anyone else's intellectual property, so spend the money to work with lawyers to make sure that that is the case. And you want to make sure that you protect your own intellectual property. So work with the lawyers to identify what components, what parts of this can we actually protect with a patent or a design registration.
Yeah, that's something that we've been through. We've got some design protection on one of our first custom products. We have already seen a copycat pop up on Alibaba that they've copied it, and we think they might have managed to tweak it just enough where they're getting around the patent. But yeah, I think it's unavoidable that people are going to eventually copy it. I know, just speaking from our experience of getting things made from scratch is it's going to take way longer than you think. I don't know. I'm sure that's been the case with you, but it surprised me when you're building something from scratch how much longer it takes, obviously, than just getting something off the shelf. And a way that we've adapted to that now is to almost have multiple tracks of products. Some that are completely custom, that we're not super reliant on them being launched now. And then other products that are kind of slightly custom and then not completely off the shelf, but they can get to market quicker. Because if you put all of your eggs in one basket, I think you kind of have that, you're not in a huge rush with this product and this brand, right? So you have that kind of luxury. But I think if you have an existing brand, it's important to understand if you are going to go down that route of custom made products, to understand that it can
take a long time. Yeah. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that if you are designing something custom and you want to keep growing, then still be launching other products that either are not custom or are less customized, and you can get going faster. And
Yeah.
just something that I thought about there when you said, these guys might have got around your patent. One thing that you can do when you work, especially with a great intellectual property attorney, is register multiple versions of your patent or design registration that will cover all bases. Or even simplify your design registration. Let me give you an example. This is a beast grip, right? So they come as a pair of beast grips. They are thick bar adapters for barbells and dumbbells. I developed this product and I had the design registration registered for it. Obviously, that's now owned by the new owners of the brand. Back in 2018, I think, an enormous competitor tried to sue me. They alleged that my product was infringing on their patent/design registration, which it wasn't, and they knew it wasn't. They were trying to scare me off. They knew I was a guy on a laptop in a cupboard. But I had my product design protected, and I went back to my attorney, and we did some work to establish. The whole time my product was suspended on Amazon, by the way. Amazon don't bother to check if the allegations are bullshit or not. They'll just suspend you. It's nonsense. And after several weeks, we determined that we were sure we were definitely not infringing on their patent, but also their patent was not very good. Because this enormous Canadian organization that had bought this brand from somebody just like me several years previously, who developed that original product, which mine was better than. But he had done his patents on the cheap. And his patent drawings were not very good and actually didn't really protect his product. And we said to this big company, you will leave me alone or we will take you to court and have your patent invalidated. So either you can play fair with me or you're going to have to deal with the entire market that's going to open up when we have your patent invalidated. And they very quickly went away. That's part one of the lesson. Spend the money to get decent drawings done. Part two is, other people soon started to rip me off. Not that I was ripping off those other guys in the first place, by the way. I had improved, my product was and is better. Other people started to rip off my design. But when we registered my design, we registered 3 different sets of drawings. One set that was very specifically like this. Another set that was slightly less complex, that had removed some of these grooves. And another set that basically had no grooves altogether. Which meant that it was therefore more generic, and then when people inevitably tried to get around the patent, because they thought that they could just create something that doesn't look exactly like this, they couldn't, because I'd already thought of that, or my lawyer had, and we were able to stop them. So
That's
what you do
interesting.
is, if you've developed a product that has this very specific aspect, talk to your lawyer about, yes, register that, but then try to register something that's slightly more generic that will sort of cover more bases. So when people try to get around it, they can't. or maybe you have an idea for a mechanism that does ABC, and you know that somebody could do it a slightly different way. Register that different way.
Yeah.
And then
Even if you're not doing it.
Even if you're not doing it. Or actually do it. Do the different way as a cheaper variation. Cover all bases.
That makes a lot of sense. I wish we'd spoken to you about this before we did it.
You're a lawyer though, man. It might not be too late. I don't know the ins and outs of the case.
Because Tom literally sent me the photo of what we've had protected and the drawing of it, and then the photo, the lawyer that helped. I think it's the lawyer that helped us, and he was basically like, "Yeah, I think it's outside of it." But that makes sense that if you try and cover as much as potentially what other people could do, then you're protected, aren't you? But
yep.
Yeah, okay. So what else have you got going on then? Because you've mentioned earlier on a couple of times, and we've briefly spoken about it, but not in any detail, that you've got a book coming out.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've written a book. It's written, it's done, it's being edited, and it's going to be released in October 10th. The book is called Quit Stalling and Build Your Brand. And it is a roadmap for people just starting or people who are already doing 6, 7, or even 8 figures. But it's a roadmap to e-commerce success. It's It's a book about the sound business principles, timeless principles to apply to your e-commerce business. So it's not like a very specific tactical book about a specific platform. It's not going to go out of date in 6 months. My intention is that people will find this incredibly useful and refer back to it year after year. It's the book that I wish it existed for me. It's full of examples from my brand, but also just wider business in general. And yeah, it's coming out in October. I'm really proud of it. It's taken me about 14 months to write. And if people go to quitstallingbook.com/honest, they can get a free chapter now in advance of the book coming out, an entrepreneurship mindset mini course, and an e-commerce hacks ebook. And of course, you're on the waiting list, so you get access before anyone else does when the book drops in October. So yeah, quitstallingbook.com/honest.
And we'll put a link down below for all of that stuff. I mean, that's amazing. First of all, congratulations, because
Thanks, buddy.
I can't imagine what it is like to write a book, but I can imagine it's not an easy thing to do, right?
It's not. It's fun. There comes a point that when you're just like done. You just want it to be finished. Not that it's not enjoyable, because it is, but like it is a long process, and also it's nerve-wracking. Like, a few people have read bits and bobs, and my editor says it's good, but I haven't put it out into the wider world yet. So it's like, will people like it? I hope they do. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm really proud of it. I felt like that there was space for this book. I felt like there were books in the e-commerce space which were great, but were either very specific and therefore going out of date fast, or on the general same track as my book, but a bit vague.
There's also a point that we, just before we started the cameras rolling and the mics recording, we were talking briefly about, and I don't know if you want to announce it, so I'm not going to name any names, but long story short, we were talking about your story being hugely successful. Obviously, you didn't say that in your own words about yourself, but your successful story, but how it's relatable to normal people, because you're very successful. You make great, but it's not a $500 million where it feels like
the point of the book. And I'll name the guy that you're getting at in a moment. But the point of the book, part of it, is to say, like, it sounds kind of remarkable. Like, dude starts a business, grows it to $6 million, and sells it. It's not that remarkable. It's achievable. That's what I'm trying to say in this book. You do not need a business degree or an MBA. All you need to do is quit stalling and build your brand. Even if I'd been doing $12 million, which I probably would have been if I'd launched the brand into the US, which I regret not doing. That's an important lesson learned. Even then, it still wouldn't have been that remarkable. And I don't mean that to sound big-headed or ungrateful. I'm just what I mean to say is that should be inspiring to people. That should make people say, cool, I can do this. Because you absolutely can. Like, the opportunity is 100% there. Provided you get some sound principles right, and those are laid out for you in the book. The guy you were getting at, if people are aware of this guy or not, if you're not, then check out a podcast called Diary of a CEO. The host is a really amazing guy called Stephen Bartlett. He was expelled from school, dropped out of university with nothing, started a social media agency called Social Chain. It was listed on the stock market at one point for something crazy like $250 million. He sold that business. Now he has multiple businesses and hosts this incredible podcast and has written a fantastic book or two. And he's speaking in my city shortly after my book comes out, and I have somehow managed to blag the opportunity to open up. I'm the support band. I'm speaking for like 10 or 12 minutes before he comes out. And, we were chatting off camera about that and how I was trying to pitch myself as like, Stephen Bartlett's up here at the moon. I'm maybe just at the level of an airliner, right? You can get there. You just need to follow the path and build a solid brand based on sound business principles.
Yeah,
That's kind of the purpose of the book.
And I honestly think that having that belief is incredibly important for sure, because as I said, I used to sit there and think e-commerce is for other people. How do you buy this stuff and sell it? It seemed impossible. So the next step then is, once you start doing that, is actually selling your brand. So it's great to be able to learn from someone that's been there and done it, and to have all of those like principles and all of those learnings and all of that stuff in a book. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So I can't wait to get hold of my copy and dive into it. Ben, what do you think the next 5 years or so look like for you? Where do you see yourself when you've got so many things that you're still doing?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, personal level, baby number 3 is coming in December.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's gonna be crazy. 3 kids. We're outnumbered now. We're moving from man marking to zonal marking. We're building a house that's going to be completed next year. That's exciting. Business wise, the parent and baby brand will launch next year, and we're going to tell the world about it. Going to keep growing this sports brand and tell the world about it. The book comes out in October. About 3 weeks after that, there will be a course to accompany the book. It's not expensive. It's just a little course that people can upgrade to with the book, if they so wish. It's a bunch of supplementary material that really dives into things in more detail. So that's fun. Gonna continue speaking. I love speaking. Been on the speaking circuit a bit this year, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. I'm looking forward to some more trips next year. Probably get back out to Vietnam. Hopefully go to some events around Europe, maybe the US, India. And who knows? Maybe I'll start writing another book.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, it's been amazing, man. It's always great to chat to you. It's great to. It's funny because I remember when I saw you on Twitter for the first time, and I read your bio, and I was like, "That's the guy that sold Beast Gear." And then the next time I think we chatted, we were organising the first interview that we did on the channel, and then we obviously we met in London, if only briefly, but. Yeah, it's been great getting to know you, and great having you back on the channel. And
thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to see the book. I'm excited just to follow your journey, because I love that you're doing all these things, but you're somebody that does things in the right way. So it's exciting to follow the different business ventures that you've got.
Thank you, man.
So yeah, we'll put all the links down below to anything that Ben mentioned. Have you got any last words, Ben, before we wrap it up?
I think my last words are that if you've got an idea and you haven't started because you're stalling, then quit stalling. And if you're already running your business but you feel like your business is stalling, then fear not, because you have everything you need. Most of the information that you require is available for free in the form of fantastic YouTube channels like Alex and Tom's, podcasts, or affordably through books and good courses and that type of thing. You can absolutely do it. Entrepreneurship is not for other people, it's for you too. And thanks for having me.
Great last words. All right, Ben.
Boom.
Speak to you soon.